Hey guys, in this week's Casually Criterion episode, we are going to be reviewing Hiroshima Mon Amour. So, join us!
Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, that's really good to hear. And Justin, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm good. I'm trying not to drown over here in the flash floods we've been having today, but it's ceased raining for a while. I just have wet shoes everywhere now.
Yeah.
Everywhere? How many shoes did you wear today?
2. They're big.
Oh.
Yeah.
Those are really big shoes if they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
2 pairs of shoes or just 2 shoes?
Just 2.
Oh.
I was exaggerating for
Well, yeah, what size do you
dramatic
wear?
effect. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well. I didn't do any jokes. We're talking about Hiroshima. So I figured
It's-
no jokes today.
Yeah, it's funny enough by
How
itself.
respectful of you.
Just kidding. That's not true.
Also, I just didn't want to make any jokes, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you don't have to make jokes. We like you for you. You don't have to be funny all the time.
Oh, well, that was really, really nice. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. All right. If this is your first time listening, this is a Casually Criterion episode, which we like to do usually every other episode, where we review a film from, you guessed it, the Criterion Collection that is voted on by our listeners, usually via our Twitter page. Before we get into the main review, we usually do news on the march, but not today. I would have said something earlier in the show and you would have heard it, but that's not happening. So, if you haven't seen the movie, you probably shouldn't listen. It'd probably be pretty boring, but you're welcome to anyway if you want to. All right, like I said earlier, this week we are reviewing Hiroshima Mon Amour, spine number 196.
That's right. As Mike said, the listeners choose our Criterion films they're reviewing by voting on a poll that we put out on our Twitter page. So follow us there at Casual Cinecast. You can message us there. You can email us at casualcinemedia@gmail.com. Send us questions, feedback, your opinion on the films that we're talking about, whatever you want, as long as it's relatively nice and not rude.
Yeah.
And then, of course, if you haven't done so, you like the show, rate us, follow us, wherever you're listening, whatever platform that is, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, please and thank you. Okay, now I say we start the review.
Yeah, no news.
Yeah.
Let's
We can
straight
just
movie.
Get straight into it today.
Weird.
Sure. We're striking
I know.
with the writers, so we're not doing news.
We can't be bothered to
news.
write. Yeah. All right. Anyways.
Oh, that's how I write. Why I didn't write any jokes? That should have
yeah.
been the joke there. Oh boy,
Yeah.
I really missed that
Well,
one.
you still made it.
Yeah, just barely.
You got there.
Right under the gun.
You got there.
Hiroshima. C'est fou ce que tu as une belle peau. Toi,
Moi? Oui. Tu m'auras vu.
All right. As always with our Criterion films, we will not be doing our usual spoiler-free section up front like we do for the newer films. We're going to go straight into talking about it, spoilers and all from the word go. So this is your spoiler alert. So if you have not seen Hiroshima Mon Amour and you don't want it spoiled, pause the podcast now, go watch the movie, come back and finish listening.
All right. So Hiroshima Mon Amour was directed by Elaine Rizne. It stars Emmanuel Riva and Eiji Okada. The IMDb synopsis says, a French actress filming an anti-war film in Hiroshima has an affair with a married Japanese architect as they share their differing perspectives on war.
Mm-hmm. Accurate.
Yes, it is. So, who picked this film?
I did.
Okay, so in tradition, I guess that means you should kick us off with your thoughts.
Sure. So I picked this film. What was the topic? Oh, it was the Ari Aster included this in his adventures in movie-going, yeah. So we chose from that. So I chose this film because it's been one that I've wanted to see for a long time. The French New Wave has been a favorite genre of mine since I first discovered what it was and learned about it. And this is one of the early French New Wave entries, so it's always been one that's piqued my interest, but one I just never got around to. And as far as Alain Resnais goes, I really like Last Year at Marienbad. I think is a really great, bizarre, weird movie that I have never forgotten, but I think I've not even begun to pierce the surface of the film because it's there's a lot to it, and I've only seen it twice, and I just don't think that's enough. And I think
how many times would be enough?
7?
Oh. How intimidating.
I'm guessing. I don't know. I mean, if you did a lot of research beforehand, to what things meant and watched it with all of that in your mind, previous people's interpretation.
Yeah.
Yep, that might cut you down to 3 or 4.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Shave some off there.
Yeah. But anyways, honestly, I'm not even sure that movie, and not to get too far ahead of myself, that this movie, in some ways, aren't necessarily there to be fully decoded. And in some ways, that's part of the appeal of these movies, is there certain things that remain mysteries. And this film, like I said, I haven't seen it, so this was my first time. And I think I expected something a bit more rudimentary or early filmmaking, knowing that this was his first film. Mm-hmm. And
his first feature film.
His first feature film, yes, correct. Thank you. And an early French New Wave. So I guess I expected something a little bit more a low budget feeling, like 400 Blows or Breathless or some of the early Agnes Varda. And this felt very polished. It felt a lot closer to Last Year at Marienbad. And I was kind of surprised and shocked at times by just how good this movie looks and how deliberate it is, which is not something I associate with French New Wave very much. Sure.
Unless it's deliberately trying not to look deliberate.
Yeah, that's fair. Who could say?
Yeah.
But I was just drawn in by this movie from the opening 15 minutes, to the point where once it kind of became a narrative film and we got into the actual story, I was a little disappointed because I was enjoying the first 15 minutes so much.
Yeah, you wanted another Night and Fog.
Yeah, basically Night and Fog, but with more artistic editing and narration and
sure.
People or random shots of naked parts of naked bodies together strewn in there. But I love, to me, this just feels so similar to Last Year at Marienbad in terms of we aren't really sure of time, and we aren't really sure, or we're not really shown in a traditional way what memories are, and flashbacks are interwoven with current scenes, and documentary footage is interwoven into that sometimes. And there's this weird sense of floating around and sometimes darting around back and forth between time that I think makes his films, this one and Last Year at Marienbad, very hypnotic to me and very poetic feelings. I feel like I'm floating through the film while watching.
Sure.
And it just kind of engulfs me. I also felt that when it was over, I wish that I had been watching it for a second time so I knew everywhere it was going, because I kept finding myself like wondering what the movie was about and what it might have to say. And I almost feel like now that I might have some ideas of what it has to say, I could get way more out of watching it. So like in some ways I felt like, okay, now I'm primed to watch this movie when it was over.
Now I know what I'm in
if that
for,
makes sense.
Sure.
So I feel almost ill-equipped to talk about it in some ways, because I feel like I've only begun to scratch the surface on it. I think it's got a lot on its mind, a lot to say, and even some things that I may never understand. And that's cool, because like I said, I'm just kind of hypnotized by the voiceover and the music and the panning camera and just the tone of everything. So I'll leave it there to say that I really enjoyed the experience of watching it, which is kind of the opposite of a lot of movies we've reviewed lately from Criterion. And I look forward to seeing what you guys think and diving into it some more. But I did really like this a lot. Mike, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is actually my second time to see this movie. I saw it probably like 12 or 13 years ago now. And I did get a lot more out of it this time than I did then. And I still feel like, yeah, I probably don't know as much as there is to know about this film, right? But to answer your question, I guess what this movie is to me is it's about memory. Like you said, the camera technique of like and the editing technique, not necessarily camera, but the editing technique of intercutting shots of different time periods back and forth of her, back in France, and then also her today in Hiroshima. It gives you this sense of like she is thinking about this. This is flashing into her brain at the moment, Mm-hmm. And it very much does feel a little different than a lot of its peers in the French New Wave movement. Like, I believe, this was one of the films that put the French New Wave kind of on the map. It brought the movement, I guess, to people's attention. Mm-hmm. And it does feel, I guess, more polished is a right word. There's so many pretty shots. The signs, the neon signs all over the place. The negative space around the city that has just started being rebuilt, Mm-hmm. All the places there aren't buildings filling the frame, Yeah. It's just really interesting, and it's a snapshot in time, because if you go there now, I'm sure it will look much more filled, But this wasn't that long after the devastation, and so it's very much like a wounded city, and it's still very much felt throughout the movie, and the way that imagery is kind of sprinkled throughout. It's really pretty. In like a sad, horrible way, but like, you know what I mean? It's very melancholy and kind of...
Yeah. Everything is like well composed, and then that's what struck me, I think, in terms of calling it well polished, is like the composition seems spot on, and there's a lot of dollies, so the movement seems really deliberate and intentional.
Yeah, it's not that handheld Godard type camera that you see starting in Breathless,
Yeah. Which Godard uses dollies too eventually, but this is 1959, which is close to Breathless and whatnot.
And there is some of that in this film, right? There's some like walking shots but the camera is never quite as jerky as it is when people think of the French New Wave, I think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a very moody movie. It's one that I think you have to want to commit to. You have to want to be interested in. Uh-huh. But I really enjoyed my second watch through of it. Hopefully, if I ever do another one, it won't be another 13 years. So that maybe I can get even more out of it instead of having to kind of rewatch it and get my bearings all again for the first time. But anyway, Chris, what say you?
Yeah, I'll second a lot of what you guys said. I think Mike kind of really hit the nail on the head with the Hiroshima being the wounded city. This is a movie... Well, what I'll also say is this is a movie that I've always circled, but it kind of confused me because it was called Hiroshima Mon Amour, And I was like, this is this movie about the World War II bombing, but it was also a French movie about love. And I was like, I was always very confused by it without watching it. Does that make sense? Because I didn't know exactly what it was. And I'm glad I finally got to watch it.
You were right on both of those things, sort of.
Yeah, exactly. But in the pitch, I didn't quite understand what it was going to be.
Yeah.
So I never picked it up. Anyways, but Hiroshima is this kind of wounded city. And I think this movie is about being afraid to forget the horrible things we've done to each other to a certain extent. There is an element of this in this movie. On the Criterion channel, there's this, they have this observation on film art that goes along with this film, kind of like the Ari Aster introducing this film, that was really interesting. And it talked about how this was kind of a revolution in how you present flashbacks. Like, I don't even think the director thought of the flashbacks as flashbacks. They're presented as we're in her head. Does that make sense? So, like, we are experiencing the same ideas in the present as she thinks back. So, if that makes sense, we're not actually flashing back. We are experiencing her thoughts. Yes, her memories, which I found interesting. I also think that this is one of those times that we've used that we go back to a movie and the devices used in the movie are constantly used in modern day cinema. So it feels, we feel natural to it, whereas opposed to at the time, it felt much more revolutionary than it does now. Is kind of how I see it, but I'm not exactly sure. Anyways, I also really enjoyed this movie. I thought the only two actors really did a really great job. I like movies about memory and about it's about mortality too, right? Like,
right.
I mean,
Well, the fleeting nature
of
everything, right? Like the fleeting nature of a moment, the fleeting nature of an accurate memory.
Yeah, it's not about death per se, but it is about death of memory. Hiroshima happened, and there's also this other the German spy thing happened, and we forget these things, and it's very important that we remember them. So I really enjoy this movie. I can't wait to break it down with you guys. A hearty recommend for sure. And the other thing is, you said something just right after you watch it. You're like, "Oh, this movie is short," and it's an hour and a half, but it doesn't feel like an hour and a half. Like,
what's it feel like?
It kind of just flies by. I mean, I don't know how you guys like.
So it feels shorter to you, is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
It feels like 4 hours long. No, it just feels. it just kind of flies by, I think. There's a progressive nature to the story where you want to know what happens. Maybe it's partially because of some of the movies we've watched lately. They kind of take their time. They're leisurely in their pace, where this one's like just moves along, even though it's kind of this French New Wave style, which usually doesn't necessarily, is a little bit more leisurely up to a certain extent. Anyways.
Yeah. Well, one of the qualities that I found about the film that was keeping me engaged was trying to discern and getting lost in the time that's passing within the film, because there are times when it feels like she's about to leave in the next scene, we're almost to the next day where she's going to leave. Maybe we are, even in the day at times, but like the film between its like editing and flashbacks and everything just kind of makes you lose track. And like, there are certain points where I'm like, oh yeah, like we're still in like the same night or haven't even gotten to the next day yet, but it's just, there's no real clear passage of time. So it does take this idea of her leaving without making it a ticking time bomb sort of element, which gives it a whole weird vibe in terms of time passing in a good way. Weird.
Yeah. Well, and also every time they part ways, they sort of kind of pick up where they left off, to where it almost seems like this conversation, like everything that's not in the same theme of what they've been talking about the whole time is cut from the movie. So it seems like they're doing nothing but talking about, memory and war and love and not wanting to part.
Yeah, they pick up right from where they left off. Yeah.
Right. But it's like, we're not seeing the times where that's not happening, right? Where they're doing something else, or where they're separated. And we do see a little bit of them separated, but that's mostly them like kind of coming back together again as well when that happens, right? So it's almost like we're seeing like the memory years later of like just the parts that was like memorable, you know what I mean? Or just like the pieces that they're able to still kind of put together to make up that day. I don't know. I don't know what I'm getting at exactly, but it feels very very deliberately paced, but not like, I don't mean that like saying it's slow, but in that it feels like one conversation spread out over a day.
Yeah, totally. It's like a unfunny, slower version of like what they're doing in like Scott Pilgrim, where they have conversations play out over like 4 different locations that pick up like off of each other. Like
right, exactly.
Like the line in response to a question will happen like at a different time of day in a different place.
Right. It's like, yeah, to be continued in like the diner down the road in a little bit, but we're going to cut to that pretty quickly, you know, so you don't feel the downtime.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was interesting. So what did you guys... So I read that this was supposed to be a documentary originally. That was the intention?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a companion piece to Night and Fog, but apparently Resnais basically didn't want to do a documentary about Hiroshima. I think this is the way he could kind of crack it in a sense. Like this is his way in, was to do something about loss and memory and love.
Yeah. From my understanding, they're like, Hiroshima is still happening essentially because there are bombs in, you know, like this could happen at any point, you know, like again, and we're forgetting the damage that was done. So it's kind of more like this is an ever-present danger. We need to remember. That was kind of where I think the idea of this came from, as opposed to a documentary that this happened in the past. This is still happening is kind of what he was.
Yeah, you kind of saw a little bit of this in the banners that in that movie they were making.
Yeah,
where they were talking about like if there's like 40,000 H bombs that are like the temperature of the sun or something like that, then like what do you call that? You know, I don't know. I don't remember exactly what the banner said, but
yeah,
that idea was captured, I think, pretty succinctly. This idea that like the world is just stockpiling nuclear weapons. And how could that possibly
be a good
thing? You know, like how could that end in any other way?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you think that I guess the city of Hiroshima, as represented in this film, which I assume was relatively accurate for the time.
I think that's actual documentary footage, isn't it? Sorry to interrupt.
Maybe. I'm thinking of just how it's sort of touristy. Right.
And like
they have like tours,
the museum.
And like,
they've kind of
in the movie we saw the new Hiroshima hotel.
Yeah, yeah, and which that shot made me think of Wes Anderson, by the way.
Yeah,
not that I think he would stoop to have a hotel called the New Hiroshima Hotel. And
wait a minute,
a film.
Wes Anderson being influenced by French New Wave? I don't believe you.
Yeah,
get out of here.
Yeah. Shocking.
Is this a new observation? Because this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, I've got some ideas penciled in. I'm working on a longer thesis before I really lay this out for you guys.
I look forward to this.
Save it for the new Wes Anderson movie.
Well,
Bob.
Okay, that shot punched me in the face as a Wes Anderson influence on Wes Anderson. But anyways, I don't know what to make of the city itself kind of turning itself into capitalizing on this atrocity. Not that I necessarily pass the judgment on them, because what else are you supposed to do?
Well, I think that's the point, though, right? That's what we do. That's what humans do. Not necessarily we, isn't like us, but like people, right? Life goes on. Life continues, and you have to just. There's going to be a scar there, but. You know, people still got to work. People still got to live.
Capitalizing on it by having a hotel called New Hiroshima or the museums or
there's that tour. There's a tour in the there's like a tour guide lady, right?
Yeah, it's a bus, I think, a tour bus
yeah,
of
the bus,
people or something.
That's what
I'm just talking about all of it. Just because in some ways it's important to have those and like remember them, but in some ways it also detracts from the atrocity, the way that it's presented to me, or at least the way it presents itself in this movie to me. And there is bits and pieces in here of her wanting to, or worrying that she's going to forget the pain, you know, and saying that, I think she's talking about the guy that she loved in Nevers or whatever.
The German soldier.
Yeah. That died, and she's talking about how traumatized she was, and there's all these sections of her like screaming and being locked in a basement or whatever. And she talks about like, but I know eventually I'll like only remember a bit of what that pain was like, or a small piece of the pain. And then I'll remember having the pain, but I won't feel it, or something to that effect. Right. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt that the same way about the city kind of turning into a touristy sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's very intentional, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, I think, but part of that though is like, yeah, you have the characters not wanting to forget the pain, but also I think that's kind of what humans are hardwired to do. Otherwise, we wouldn't really be able to go on, because life would be horrible.
Yeah, we just stay in the pain. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's been hurt. I mean, obviously not every city has had a nuclear bomb dropped on it, thank goodness. But you know, like her pain isn't a nuclear bomb, but her pain to her is very real.
Sure.
And she did eventually move on, and she's still hurt by it, but it's not the same. Like the memory scars over, you know?
Yeah. I would even think there's both at the end and the beginning, I think she's like an analogy or a metaphor for the rest of the world, you know, forgetting Hiroshima. But like, does that make sense? Like,
well, yeah, I think so, because there's that scene where he asks her, like near the beginning of the movie, where he's like, what did Hiroshima mean to you?
Yeah, she says, I remember Hiroshima. And
I keep saying, no, you don't.
Yeah, no, you don't.
Yeah, he's like, you don't know anything.
I had family that died there, you know, like, yeah. And then it kind of moves into she had the German soldier died or whatever. And then at the end, it goes back to he says, I'm Hiroshima, and she says, and you are Nevers. So I'm not sure if that was his intention or not, to tie them into this. Like, he represents Hiroshima more in the forgetfulness of it. Does that make sense? Or am I way off?
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't spend nearly as much time talking about it, about his experience and personal connection to Hiroshima, as she does the one German soldier that she liked or loved.
Yeah, they were
dying.
going to elope, and then he was killed by, I guess, people in her village or her city, or yeah, it was, I guess, as a city, because there's 40,000 people living there. But that's whenever they like shaved her head, you know, like that. Yeah. You know, it was labeled a collaborator or whatever they called those girls that fornicated with German soldiers, you know.
Yeah, I think I spent a good amount of the time wondering if I was supposed to be viewing her as, you know, self-centered, I guess, in a way. And I don't think by the end of this movie that I'm supposed to feel this way. I'm just kind of relating my experience while watching, was wondering if, like, she's in Hiroshima with a guy who was personally devastated by the bomb. And most of the movie, she's recounting her trauma of losing like one person who she was in a relationship with, and not like her entire family. And like,
well, she lost her home.
She was persecuted for it to a certain
yeah,
extent,
she lost
Sure.
her, like, being welcome in her like home that she misses and never wanted to leave. So she's in exile to an extent.
Yeah.
Sure, but I understand
I'm just
what
not
you're
sure
saying
that
also.
those are equal because
No,
what do they say towards the end? Like it was like 200,000 dead and 80,000 wounded in seconds, in 9 seconds or whatever.
Well, I think the movie goes through great pains to show us that by juxtaposing these horrible images, whether it be, the beginning with the actual footage or, the pictures on the movie set or the extras in makeup or the signs and the parades.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think that tragedy is very much living in the city. But yeah, I agree. He doesn't spend as much time talking about his trauma.
Yeah.
I think it's represented visually through what we see of the city.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure how we were supposed to feel about her character talking more about that and
about
less
her trauma.
amidst much
In a movie called
larger
Hiroshima.
trauma. Yeah. But I don't think we're necessarily supposed to judge because I think it does understand.
I think
by
if
the
we're
end of the
judging,
movie.
neither one of these people are that great because they're both married.
True, but I think it treats their tragedy and their trauma as personal and as individual, and equally fair to have and to feel by the end of it, which is interesting. And that's one of those reasons that I think, like I said, like, okay, I might be primed to watch this movie again now because I'm not worried about judging her,
Right,
or anything like that. Interpreting anybody negatively in terms of their trauma. But anyways, moving on.
Well, I think there's a key, and maybe it's in my head, but like to me, she just represents the rest of the world. Like trying to be understanding of what happened. Does that make sense? And like, well, we also had this trauma, and then just kind of trying to deal with it. And as the rest of the world moves on, they all forget. I don't know. That's, to me, they aren't even almost supposed to be people. They're supposed to be representations of like big groups of people, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I walked away with it, and I'm not even sure how that idea hasn't clicked completely into place yet. But that's kind of what I was.
Well, I think one of my favorite scenes of the movie is the one I referenced earlier. It's the one where he asks what Hiroshima meant to her, where she was at the time.
Yeah.
In her life, and she says it represented the end of the war.
That was actually really good. Yeah.
They were at shock or like disbelief that they did it, that they were able to do it, and then an underlying fear of what next.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what, like, maybe the rest of the world doesn't see it on like such a personal level, like when you're walking around in the city and living there and having like whatever, like 90% of the city destroyed or whatever percentage it was. But the world took notice and the world didn't forget it. It just means something very different to them.
Sure. Well, I mean, and I don't remember if this is spelled out explicitly, but like, I remember thinking, oh, everybody's rejoicing that the war is over. And meanwhile, this guy just lost all of his family, like, and the rest of the world is rejoicing, like, I felt there was an ironic or something there to that as well. Like you must feel ostracized because.
Right. Well, differing perspectives, right? Like,
well, from an American perspective, at least growing up, I feel like the perspective on Hiroshima and Nagasaki was victory.
Sure,
like
that it had to be
victory
done.
for us, right? Like the end of, wasn't like relishing in it necessarily, but just the end of the war. And then for us, like, I don't know, I always read about it as the way that we won the war, right? So
yeah, it was, yeah.
Maybe not celebratory, but I think that's how I always felt about it, was like kind of just end of the war. So I could see that her representing people.
Well,
And-
I mean, she was in it. She was in the war. Her life was directly affected by it because she was, living in France and it affected all of Europe,
Sure,
So
France was occupied.
So
yeah.
like the ending of the war is going to be a big deal to
everybody.
literally everybody. It was
Yeah.
a world war.
Mm.
But yeah, to Japan specifically, it's a lot of like really horrible pain and you know, to everyone, life was different after that, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
well,
then-
that's where like Stray Dog comes in, right? You know, from the Japanese perspective, you get a lot of like people not sure what's going on. You know, like especially Japanese people, because they had believed one thing, and all of a sudden they were beaten. You know, anyways, the emperor did not tell him to commit suicide. You know, type of stuff. Anyways, straying a little bit from the movie.
Sure, but I think, but like part of what I think one of the core themes of this movie, but you know, besides love and memory, it's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you know, the things that make us different are also the things that could bring us together, possibly, or you know, the meaning of something to me is not necessarily the same meaning of something to you.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's just as equal of a theme
Yeah.
as memory at the very least. So
Yeah, and you made this point earlier, Mike, but it's shifting and fading and the inevitability of that over time.
yeah, exactly.
I think the other thing that this movie reminded me about was the fear of the bomb after it happened, you know, like, and how omnipresent that fear was. And maybe I should still be scared, but it is not a thing that I think about or I'm worried about. I mean, the stuff with Russia could lead to that now, you know, but like, I'm not necessarily.
Yeah, we luckily grew up post Cold War in like Cold War in a time where we weren't necessarily worried about the immediacy of being nuked at any moment.
And we also, we kind of grew up right next to a power plant. You know, like I was a little bit further away when I grew up, but like I'm literally like within 5 miles of a nuclear power plant right now. You know, like, so that I'm a little bit more worried about than an actual nuclear bomb. So
yeah, but it's always been around for us, the bomb.
Yeah, that's true too. So
it's always been a thing. It's not something new.
Yeah, it's not the
when you
world
first learned
literally
about it.
changing immediately.
Yeah. I'm more worried about like AI than I am about the nuclear bomb.
Yeah, which I mean, people were writing about that before we were born, but
Sure, but
it's
now we are
coming around and changing.
Yeah.
Things like that are, you know, similar in terms of like a shift in world perspective.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Do you guys know if this movie was all ADR'd, like all re-recorded?
I believe that was the standard. Yeah.
Yeah, I know it was in like Italy post-war.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
was it?
it definitely every time he laughed, I could tell it was ADR.
Yeah, I know there's some scenes where they're like talking and kissing each other at the same time, but there's no resemblance of that in the dialogue the way it was re-recorded.
I wonder if it's not part of the whole memory thing. You know, like there's dialogue at the very beginning of the movie where they're like making love, but I don't think the dialogue is coming from that moment in time. They're not talking about that there.
No, but there are scenes where they're talking to each other and there's literally dialogue. I'm talking about there too.
Okay.
Just kind of across the board.
Yeah.
But there are these movies where that adds, you know, and I'm thinking of like maybe something like spaghetti westerns or like kung fu films that are dubbed in English or something. There's a charm to it, and I wouldn't say there's a charm to it in this movie, but that ethereal memory lost in time. Yeah, it really lends itself to this movie as like, even if it's not matching their lips because they've ADR'd it, or it's not matching their actions because they're kissing while talking and that's not reflected in the way it's re-recorded. It just kind of helps the vibe and goes along with it for me. Just thought it was fun.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes, because like every time you ADR, like the dialogue is always like super clear and crisp, you know, whereas like if they were filming it on location, they would sound a little bit more like representative of like the room they were in, you know, of how. Right. So it's like, it does give it this intimate feeling, but I don't know that was intentional or if it was just, you know, it's a French New Wave film, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you think that's just how you do it at the time. I mean, like some Fellini stuff that we've done has that vibe too.
I think all Fellini stuff has that vibe.
Well, it's all ADR, but some stuff where like the ADR feels like intentionally the right choice, even if it wasn't, and it was just circumstance.
Yeah, like very intimate.
Yeah, this has that too. So I find that fun.
Yeah, Knights of Cabiria. What a good movie.
Yeah. I
Do we have anything else?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've kind of covered it. Actually, I have a question, and then I'm done, I think.
Okay.
The scene where they're in the bar, the Casablanca bar
tea
at
room?
the end.
Yeah.
It is a tea room. Yeah. Okay. Well, is there any reference to Casablanca?
Oh, I'm sure.
As obviously the movie, but isn't like, wasn't Casablanca like kind of a place between like, not like it was a neutral territory or something like that during a war where like people could go?
Yeah, that's what the movie's about.
Yeah. So I haven't quite decoded how naming the tea house Casablanca or something kind of plays into these people from like two different sides of the war meeting and whatnot.
And is it called that because of the famous movie, or is it called that because of the place?
Yeah.
Seems like
that wasn't my question, but we can talk about that if you need to. But I don't.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Chris?
It seems like everything was found, as opposed to seems like there was a place actually called Casablanca. So I don't know, like
maybe,
and whoever owned it named it that, as opposed to them naming it for the movie. But I don't know.
Possible. But then you would choose that for a reason, even if you found it. You'd be like, "Oh, yeah, let's do here because of this."
Yeah,
you know,
that's true. Also, that the inside of that place was pretty awesome.
Yeah, but the scene where they're staring at each other, and the other guy comes up and starts talking to her
in English,
and he kind of sits there, and even though she's pretty unresponsive, he just kind of sits there and talks. He keeps saying things.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything that you guys brought out of that specifically. If not, that's okay. It's something that I could analyze more in a repeat viewing.
Not particularly. I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have anything right now to give you.
Okay. Yeah. Then that's something to pay attention to on a rewatch, I think, because
other than it's interesting that he assumed she spoke English. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah. That he's just assumed she would be American because maybe American people are visiting.
Yeah. In a place called Casablanca.
Well, yeah. And, I'm sure Japan was under occupation for a long time, so there's a lot of American soldiers and stuff.
Yeah. And maybe like the most tourism there is done by Americans, probably just
ironically
guilt
enough.
or yeah.
I think the tourism, that's an interesting aspect, but like I liken it to like a Holocaust museum as opposed to like, let's go to Hiroshima for a good time. It's more like, let's go and pay our respects. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Some of it has that vibe for sure.
Yeah.
Some of it,
like the real museum they were in.
Yeah. Some of it didn't have quite as solemn of a vibe as I would think, and maybe I'm just misreading.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I got a whole lot of like, other than like the tour bus and things like that, I don't know that I got a whole lot of like soulless capitalist attitude of disrespect. But I did find it weird that a bunch of foreigners were making like a film about Hiroshima in Hiroshima using Japanese.
Film.
What?
A peace film. Yeah, sorry.
Sure, but it's still like, it's interesting that everyone there seemed so cool with it and not like, really, you guys are just going to come over here and film this here? You don't have your own tragedies you can
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can show everyone.
perhaps if this is about, if everybody was worried about the nuclear bomb and it happening again, going to Hiroshima would be the place to go to, though. Even if, does that make sense? But it happened here. This is the result of the bomb that we are still worried about happening. I don't know. That,
Like a never forget type situation.
Yeah, I think making a anti-war film there is likely relatively powerful. Like that kind of makes sense to me.
Well, I think he says something to the effect. It's like, here we don't laugh at anti-war films or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Are we done or do we have more?
Yeah. I'm done with the movie. We still have our poll to do.
That's right. Okay, so I guess that concludes our review for Hiroshima Mon Amour.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Justin, move us into the next segment.
Okay.
If you remember how to do it.
I think so.
Okay.
We'll see. So the Criterion poll, as Mike said way earlier in the beginning of the episode, we put this poll up on our Twitter account. What's going to happen is we have a theme for the poll. We're each going to pick a film based on that theme, put it up on our Twitter account, and by the next episode we'll announce the winner, and that'll be our next Criterion episode. And this week the poll was my idea, so I guess I'll just go ahead. And it's not even a clever theme. I just went with sort of a comedy / lighthearted theme. Just because I think our last 3 films were this movie, Taste of Cherry, about a man wanting to kill himself, and
Spoiler.
Yeah, true. I mean, that's what the whole movie's about. Whatever.
I think it's in the synopsis.
Yeah.
Much, but yeah.
And then Jenny Dillman. So I thought something lighthearted and comedic would be fun. Just to change it up. And not too long ago, we did Solaris as well.
Yeah.
So-
which was a laugh a minute.
Yeah. So that was the last comedy film that we reviewed, obviously. So, anyways, so that's the theme. Chris, you want to kick us off with your choice?
Oh, I absolutely do. I thought you were going to go first and steal it.
No, I've been talking too long.
Okay. I'm going to stick with French films, and I'll let you take yours, but I'm going to go with Mon Oncle from Jacques Tati.
Okay, that's a good one. I like that one.
Jacques Tati's
Mon
great.
Oncle.
I like all his
Mon
films.
oncle.
Yeah. Mon Oncle.
My uncle.
Yeah. So,
Not
Mike,
Mon Uncle.
how about you? We'll leave it to Justin to last.
Okay. Well, I am going to choose a little film starring Cary Grant
Ooh.
called Arsenic and Old Lace,
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
which is a film that I love and will keep throwing on these polls until someday I get to review it.
Yeah. Well, I hope that you win.
Me too. Justin, what's your choice?
Well, I mean, so I think when we do these sort of things, or like I get the opportunity, I kind of throw in Monsieur Hulot's Holiday.
It's another
And
one
because-
that we've been, picked a couple times.
Yeah, because there's been I don't know. I'm tempted to do it but there's already been a Tati film in the list, so I don't know if putting 2 in there feels right.
Yeah,
No,
I
I
feel
think
like I broke the
2/3
theme.
of Tati, it gives us a better chance of Tati.
That's true, and we have not done a Tati.
No.
I think I'm going to go with Tati, a guy who used to work with Tati in his early films, who went on to do other things, which is Pierre Ite.
Oh.
You love this guy.
I do love this guy. I think he's brilliant, and criminally underseen, because I don't really know anybody at all other than people I've sat down with and made watch some of his stuff. Those are the only people I know who have seen some of his stuff. So I'm going to go with, actually, let me ask you, do you guys want to do his first feature-length film, or do you want to do his, 2 short films, one of which was, I think, won an Academy Award?
Which one do you like better?
I think overall the 2 short films, collectively, are the most successful, but I do really love his first feature length as well. I think it's really good.
Well, you're going to have to make a decision.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I thought you guys might have an opinion whether you'd rather do 2 shorts or 1 feature.
I would say feature, but not for any good reason. my reason is just I don't know how we would name the episode.
That's true. That's true.
True.
Well, maybe we can do the shorts and news on the march if it wins or something. Okay, yeah. So I'm going to go with Pierre Ite's The Suitor.
All right.
Which is
Sounds
a
good.
wonderful little movie about a guy who's implored by his father to get married. So he tries to figure that out, how to get married.
Sounds humorous, possibly, or sad, depending on
Better not be sad after
how
we
the movie goes.
went
But
through all
since-
this.
given that whole preamble you gave, I bet it's not sad.
Yeah. Maybe a bit of both.
Yeah.
Be
but
happy
okay.
sad.
There's a couple
Cool.
close-ups in there, so you really feel the sadness.
Yeah. So I know mine won't win because it's not a very popular movie, but I'm going to give it a go.
Hey, that's never stopped me.
That's right. Okay, so to recap, the poll theme was comedy. Mike chose Arsenic and Old Lace. I chose The Suitor, and Chris chose Mon Oncle. And
I think actually Mike might win this one.
he might.
Arsenic and Old Lace is the
I hope we all
most
win.
well-known.
It's impossible, but I hope we all win.
We all
Yeah.
win every
Then
time
we
we
have
do
to
one of
watch
these.
3 movies in a week.
Oh God, what do
True.
we do?
Yeah. All right. Well, is there anything else? But I think with that, we're done with the episode, right?
Yeah, I think we're done with the episode. Stay tuned, subscribe, all that stuff. I believe our next episode that comes out will be over Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
That's right.
Insert needle drop here.
Yeah.
Get your Ooga Chakas ready.
Yeah, and with that, Chris, I think the ending music just started.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was already going. I don't know.
Who knows? We'll see you guys later. Stay tuned till next week. We can't wait to see you.
See you later.
Bye. Au revoir.
Thank you.